This particular event is part of our Know It All panel. That is a speaker series, and we're here today to talk about the important topic of voting. And this is an important topic for many reasons, not the least of which is that in 2022, I'm very happy to say, voter registration was the highest it had been in 20 years, specifically in this one study for congressional elections. But still, 8 states enacted restrictive voting laws, and then 39 states considered another 408 restrictive voting bills. So it is a very important topic, and there's very real concerns related to this space. Initiatives that result in voter suppression have gotten worse even since then. And voter suppression is when somebody's ability to vote is denied, discouraged, or disrupted in some way. So throughout our discussion today, we're going to hear from our amazing panelists, answer lots of questions. But additionally, if you have your own questions that you have for the panelists, I encourage you to go ahead and raise your hand emoji or put them in the chat, and we'll definitely try to get to those. So I am joined by 3 wonderful panelists today. I'm so sad to say that our 4th panelist, Randy Frazier, was not able to join us because of an emergency. He's okay, but he did have to take care of something. So unfortunately, we do not have our 4th panelist, but we are so happy to be here today with Leah Giddens, is the Director of Community and Civic Engagement at the New York League of Conservation Voters. Susan Lerner is the Executive Director of Common Cause New York. And of course, Common Cause New York is very well known, I think, at this point in time. And Frances Shea has been working as an election poll worker. Actually, they are on the ground doing the great work of the elections for 15 years. And as 5 years of that as a coordinator, working for the Board of Elections. And so without further ado, I want to just go ahead and get us started. So my first question we always ask at the Know It All events is kind of tell us about yourself and how you found involvement in this kind of voting space.
Myself, I have been, it's not that I really wanted to get involved. It was like, okay, if they're going to pay me a lot of money to sit there, it was a wonderful gig, okay? And then it was like, oh, this is good, because I see how people are and how they act during voting and how they conduct themselves. And people should go out there and vote, okay? Staten Island is definitely a Republican county, but a lot of people don't show up to vote for their party, which is ridiculous. Okay, or they don't show up for the right thing. Oh, I'm going to just vote for the general election, not a primary. Well, in the primary election, what you do is you pick the candidate that you want to run against the other person, and you want to pick the best candidate for that job, not just have somebody randomly pick that person for you. The last primary that we had was a 10, there were 10 Democratic candidates running. And they were told to vote for this one first, this one second, this one third, this one fourth, by the main candidate who now has won the mayoral race. Anyway, I don't think that's very nice, that he should be able to tell people how to vote. And people listened. They came in, they wanted to change their party that day so they could vote for that particular person. Now, I work the affidavit table, and we were instructed, yes, you can do an affidavit, you can change your party, but it's up to the board to figure out whether they will accept your vote. So, think ahead of time, I mean, literally think ahead of time before you vote.
So it sounds like you raise a lot of important points related to kind of independence of thought and making sure that you're doing your own research about your candidates. You don't listen to, let's say,
you just can't.
But also that you make a good point about the understanding that how the primaries work, that you have to register for your primary. Does anybody want to tell us? I want to make sure we get to other introductions. So please.
Sure, I can jump in. Thanks so much for having me here, Stacy, and great to meet, be here with everyone. I grew up going with my mom to vote since I can remember, and it was always something that interested me in terms of politics and elections. And I did a mock election when I was in middle school, and so always a topic that I cared about, and volunteered on different political campaigns throughout college. And then most recently, at my last job and my current job, have found myself really focused on civic engagement work, particularly around voter education, advocating for voting policy to make it easier for people to vote and have their voices heard. And now I'm currently at, as Stacy mentioned, at the New York League of Conservation Voters. That is where we do a lot of advocacy for the environment, but also we say often that one of the most important things you can do for the environment is to vote, and voting in democracy is a big part of that work. And I lead a program called Our Vote Is Our Power that focuses on nonpartisan voter engagement and education. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Excellent, excellent. And I know my understanding is you do strategizing and spearheading the efforts to engage and educate New Yorkers about the environment and related to voting and such. Excellent. Great. Susan.
Hi, so I'm Susan Lerner. I'm the Executive Director of Common Cause New York. I too was brought as a child with my parents when they went to vote and understood the importance of voting. The first political campaign that I worked on, I was a high schooler. I've been interested in politics and voting all the way through. I've been doing pro-democracy work now for over 25 years, and I'm one of the founders of the Let New York Vote Coalition, which helped to bring early voting and online voter registration, no fault, or rather vote by mail to New York State, as well as automatic voter registration. And I'm one of the people who helped to adopt and implement ranked choice voting for New York City's elections. So we've been very, very deeply involved in democracy issues and really ensuring that our election system really removes barriers to voting for all eligible voters.
Excellent. Excellent. And I love that you folks are educating our audience here today. So we already figured out what primaries are. We talked about what primaries are. And you mentioned two important topics. One of them you mentioned is ranked choice voting. Right. And you also mentioned, oh my gosh, there was another phrase you said earlier.
Early voting?
Oh, I'm sorry, early voting. I want to say I wanted you to talk about pro-democracy. I love that idea. So can you tell us those two things, if you don't mind? What does pro-democracy mean? And
basically means looking at our election system from a pro-voter lens. All too frequently, because the people who set our election laws are people who have been candidates and have run under our election system, they have a particular outlook. And many of the things that they are concerned about are how elections work for candidates. Common Cause, our partners in pro-democracy organizations like the League of Women Voters, Public Citizen, our friends at the League of Conservation Voters, really look at democracy from a voter's standpoint. And we want to know, is the system set up to remove barriers to the franchise for people who have the right to vote? Because here in New York, the right to vote is a part of our state constitution. It is actually the very beginning of our state constitution. It is the lifeblood of our democracy. It is the basis of a representational system of government. And therefore, we feel it's important that when we're looking at our election system, that we look at it from the vantage point of the voter. And ranked choice voting is a voting reform that basically gives voters more choices and more voice. It allows voters in a crowded field to be able to rank their choices so that we find that voters spend more time researching candidates, and candidates spend more time talking to more voters. Because if a candidate is going to be successful in a ranked choice voting system, they want not just the first place ranking, but they want the second and third place ranking. So that means you don't just talk to your base. You have to talk to candidates outside of your base to persuade them that your approach to policy and what you would bring to government is worthwhile. And so candidates really have a different way of campaigning that we've seen in the last two mayoral races successfully applied. And what we've seen is a very, very high satisfaction rate among New York voters. Close to 96% of New York voters told us in an exit poll this last election that they found marking their ranked choice vote ballot simple and easy to do. And more than 3/4 of New York voters want to continue to use ranked choice voting.
Great. That's good to know. Thank you for that clarification. So, okay, so let's ask the most basic question about voting ever. Why should people vote?
Well, do you want to let somebody else decide your future, or do you want to have a say? That's really the most basic point of it. And I've heard people say, oh, it's not worth voting. They don't listen to us. They don't reflect my particular positions. They don't care about me as an individual. But if you do not vote, you are losing the ability to have a say in the future of your city, your county, your state, your country. Somebody else is going to vote, and they're going to decide for you. So staying home and saying, oh, I don't want to encourage politics, it's not my business, means somebody else is deciding for you.
I agree with you, Susan. The idea is people should really go to the primary. Make sure they register at least a month before. Okay. To be able to vote, and make sure their name is spelled correctly. I've had one person that I had to spend a half hour with as a coordinator because my people couldn't figure it out. They had an apostrophe in the wrong place, plus he had a space in his name.
Oh, no.
So it was like they couldn't. Finally, I figured it out. I mean, everybody's waiting online forever to be able to get their ballot. But anyway, I told him to sign now to vote. Okay, sign his name the way it was and get a new registration and put his name on there correctly. What happened was somebody at the board inputted his name incorrect because his license was correct. But when we looked it up, it wasn't correct. So somebody at the board had made a mistake. So always check. You want to vote. Please vote. That's all I ask everybody. It's the most important thing you can do. And how many people are denied that right? Seriously. So, yes.
Leah.
No, I think it's a good point. It's one of the most basic things you can do to have your voice heard, and it affects everything in your life, any issues that you care about, but also to Fran's point is that there's a lot of work that is being done to prevent people from voting, to suppress people's right to vote, laws that would make it harder, restrictions, and people wouldn't be trying to stop you from voting if it wasn't important. And if it didn't.
No, you're not being stopped to vote. People come in, they want to vote, but if they didn't register, you can't vote if you didn't register.
Yeah.
And if it says on our chart that we have to ask for your driver's license, some kind of ID, you have to provide that to us because something had happened in previous election to make that person being looked at. Okay. So, no, we don't stop anybody from voting at all. We want people to come out and vote.
So Leah, tell us about what would a voting, for people who don't know, what would a voting restriction law or, suppression law, what does that mean? What does that look like?
Yeah.
It's not the election workers, right? The election workers are not the ones stopping people from voting.
Well, no, not typically. I think it can look like, and Susan is an expert on this. And can take can take it further, but it can look like laws requiring people to provide certain types of identification or proof of citizenship identification forms that a lot of
We
people.
never ask for proof of citizenship. We never ask anything that's not in the e-poll book. If it says ID required, yes,
Yes,
because,
not in New York, but
Not in New
other
York,
states.
Fran, but in
Not-
other
well,
that's not
I'm in
happening.
New York, so
It can look like poll sites being closed, which require more people to go to the same site, which means much longer lines. It understaffed sites can cause delays. It can be a lot of different types of strategies.
Right. And luckily not in New York. All of us are in New York. But in other states, there's maybe some other things. Okay, interesting.
Even so, like there are like laws that make it or not. Like there's a great, Susan mentioned this, there was a lot of advocacy. I was a part of some of this advocacy to make it so that you could register. It's called Golden Day, that the first day of early voting is also a day that you can register to vote. So you can do both in the same day.
not in New York State. Not in New York State. I don't know where that's permissible, but not in New York State.
And you're wrong. The law was changed. The last day to register to vote is 10 days before the election. And the first day of early voting is 10 days before the election. Now, they won't be able to vote on the machines, but they will be able to
Right,
register.
I do the
Fill out an
affidavit table. They could
ballot.
do an affidavit, yes. They could change their party. They can do whatever they want.
That's it.
Doesn't mean it's going to count, and that's not for us to say. It's for the Board of Elections to say.
But what happens on Golden Day is that the new voter comes in and fills out an affidavit ballot. And the envelope to an affidavit ballot or to a vote by mail ballot, actually for the affidavit ballot, it's a voter registration form, right?
Of course,
So
yes.
get an affidavit ballot, they fill it in, they then fill in the envelope. Their ballot is sealed in the envelope.
Mhm.
The envelope is treated like a voter registration. It's kept, and the Board of Elections looks at all of the information on the registration portion of the ballot, of the envelope.
We
And-
check that beforehand to make sure everything is filled out. Everything
Exactly.
that's supposed to be filled out is filled out.
Right, and so everything you need for the board to decide, is this an eligible voter or not, is on that envelope. And Fran helps people. That she's on the affidavit desk, which is a
I'm
great
at that
thing.
table.
You're at that table, and that is a fabulous thing. The New York City Board has people like Fran to help you fill out your affidavit ballot. The board then checks, is this person eligible to be registered? If they are eligible to be registered, they're then registered, and then their vote is counted.
Yeah.
What's happened is it's collapsed the time frame. So instead of registering in advance and having the determination made by the board that the person is an eligible voter, and then they come in and vote, it's all happening at the same time after the election.
That's
So
a great clarification. Thank you so much. Good to know about this. And so, okay, we talked about early voting. So this is a good thing. Why is early voting helpful?
Should I answer that? Okay. Early voting is wonderful because it gets me extra money for the week. Thank you very much. Number two is it gives people an opportunity that can't get out at a certain time, that need an aid to help them. They have school children. They could come in right after school. It gives those people a chance to come in at various times that they wouldn't normally come in, because that one day of voting is really very hectic, especially for a presidential or mayoral race. Okay, it's very crowded. So you can't take a kid there. We've had people with wheelchairs come in, with aids, with canes. It gives them that opportunity, and it's not that crowded. And I still get paid. Thank you.
What I'm hearing is Fran is encouraging people to work, do the poll work, right? Now's a great time.
I encourage everybody to do that. Why? Because I think it's a wonderful thing to be able to help people. And I want people to come in to vote. Everybody should go in to vote. Everybody has a voice. Whether you use that voice or not is besides the point. You got to use that voice. You got to come in to vote. And then you can't complain if the wrong person is in office.
Yeah, and
See,
you don't like
that's
that
it.
person.
You
Yeah.
can't, then you can't complain.
So, okay, so anybody have any stories about when you've actually changed somebody's mind about voting? Because Susan said earlier, somebody might say, "Oh, there's no point in voting," or has anybody been successful in getting somebody who made those kinds of comments to actually come out and vote?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's what we do. And often, especially with younger people, when we offer them an opportunity to register, we'll hear, "Oh, I don't want to encourage politicians. I don't believe in politics." And that gives us an opportunity to talk about how decisions are made, about things like your health care, or what the requirements are to graduate from high school, or how available jobs are going to be once you graduate, or what's the situation around student loans. The people who are deciding that are the people that you get to vote for. And so, yeah, we do have that opportunity, particularly when we're out talking to young people. And I'm sure Leah's had that experience a zillion times.
Yeah, I think talking to people and understanding what they care about and giving people an opportunity to just learn and hear about what the possibilities are, and connecting to issues that they care about, like student loans or the environment or whatever it is for them, and creating that link kind of about voting.
Great. That's great. And so 1788, let's go back in time for a minute. 1788, states are given the power to govern voting, and states still have this power, right? So the states are given the power to govern voting. About 80 years later, the 15th Amendment gets passed, granting all male US citizens the right to vote. And now fast forward, takes another 100 years for the 19th Amendment to get passed, granting white women, the right to vote. And then various other groups are slowly granted the right to vote at various times too. What other important dates are there in voting history?
Oh, now you're really
Because you didn't know it was a pop quiz, right? This is like a history lesson.
I know, and now I'm really feeling badly, because this was a big issue for Common Cause in the 70s, and that is moving the voting age from 21 down to 18. And that was an issue that my organization, I wasn't involved then, but it was an issue my organization worked on, and was obviously very successful, because the Constitution was amended and the voting age moved from 21 down to 18. And that was really as a result of the Vietnam War, because the argument was, how can you send somebody overseas to fight in a war when they can't even vote for leaders?
Yeah. Yes. In agreement, total agreement.
Another big one is 1965 was when the Voting Rights Act passed, and that was what gave women of color in particular the right to vote, which is kind of, it's a wild and strategic thing, that the fact that the 19th Amendment did not actually do that, allow all women to vote. And so 1965 was an important year.
And I mean, 1965, that was only 61 years ago. Everybody just take a moment to absorb that fact, right? Okay. So speaking of changes in how people see voting, what have you seen any changes in how people are talking about voting, how they view voting, how they understand voting? I know we mentioned some younger generations, their minds being changed, but is everybody still looking at voting the same way, or is there new ways of understanding the importance or lack thereof of voting?
I don't think this is new per se, but I think people feel like their vote doesn't matter. They don't feel like they have a voice, and that as a single person, how can change be made? And I think that is a persistent issue that people feel. And is not unreasonable. I think it's the most important thing, but there are reasons that make sense in terms of that. And I do think that one misconception also is that there are a lot of young people that do vote and really care about voting, and it's interesting just kind of allowing them to also to amplify their voices, and yeah, and it's important to try to talk to people and kind of meet them where they are, but I think that there's a lot of feelings of disenfranchisement, and yeah.
There should be more information on the candidates out there, not just the pamphlets that come to the House, okay? And the pamphlets that come to the House, some of them don't have any information because they missed the deadline to have their information put in there. That's why I like the early voting, because you can get some information. You come in to vote and you go, I don't know who these candidates are. So we have a list. You could take a pamphlet back with you, read it, come back the next day, or the next day after that. When you're ready and you've read all of this, look up on your tablet. Everybody has a cell phone. Everybody can look up any kind of information whatsoever. Just look it up, and the thing is, your vote does count. If you stay out, your neighbor stays out, the other person stays out, now you have a whole block of people that aren't voting. That's not good. They should all come in to vote, every last one of them. That's why you're given that 10 days to vote. So it's not all hurried on the actual election day,
By the way, I did not know that there was information at the polling sites. Is that crazy that I didn't know
Yes,
that?
we have pamphlets.
I didn't even know that. God,
But
see,
we
I'm
give
learning
out the
too.
pamphlets, huh?
I'm learning
I'm
too.
sorry.
Look at this.
Okay, they give out pamphlets. Okay, if you want one, they have them on the desk. Everybody has on their desk. Every e-poll book worker, every affidavit table, the coordinators, everybody has. The thing is, you're not going to go looking through this. You're trying to vote. You want to get the hell out of there. So take a pamphlet. Go home. It's got more information than whatever comes to the House. Now, those pamphlets that you get at your door that is delivered to you, okay, has pertinent information relating to you. Please, please shred. If you're not going to use them, please shred them. They have been known to be stolen, and people go into a voting place and use the little cards or the information in back of because those are your barcodes. That barcode is your information. Shred those pamphlets, please.
So does anybody want to speak to this idea of stolen votes or something? I know this is something that we hear about. What is Fran, you mentioned it. Leah, Susan, what are your thoughts?
Okay. What happened was
sorry,
friend.
Fran, hold on a second. Sorry,
of
Fran.
Course,
I wanted to pass it on to Susan and Leah.
Of course.
Thanks.
So in all honesty, this is the first time I'm hearing about this specific problem. It's certainly not anything that we see with any regularity at all. If somebody were bound and determined wrongly to try and influence an election, the least effective way to do it is to try and imitate somebody else at the polling place, because you need thousands and thousands of people. That's just not possible.
But they do that for the mail orders also. The mail order votes, the mail-in votes. A friend of mine told me that a friend of hers went to a neighbor's house and they asked them, are you going to vote? Because they saw the pamphlets, the mail-in ballots on the table. They said, no, we're not going to. Oh, okay. Anyway, they took them. So now you have somebody went in to vote, plus they have mail-in votes also. So it doesn't matter.
So here's the thing. That person is not going to be able to vote because
I was just going to say that.
Mail-in.
They don't have the right signature. This is not anything that happens with any regularity at all.
Okay.
As you know, there are really, really significant checks after check to be sure that the person who is voting is the actual eligible voter.
Yeah,
And
it's very scary to me. I'm sorry. It's very scary to me that somebody could do that.
but
the-
it
You
is
don't know.
not anything that we see with any regularity. You know how detailed the checks are for
Okay.
a mail-in ballot, right? And you yourself are somebody who sees the process of signing in to vote. And you know how careful poll workers are when they feel like the signature doesn't quite match.
Exactly.
And so, you know, that is really the key to this process. The vast majority, just as the vast majority of Americans are honest about paying their taxes, which we all have just done in the last week, the vast majority of Americans know that, have a sense that they are, their voice is their own. And there are checks throughout the process to be sure that the person who shows up to vote is actually the eligible voter.
Oh, yes. That's when you go into the actual polling place and it's the e-poll book and we check. Okay.
And
Exactly.
the same
Exactly.
thing with the
Exactly.
mail-in ballots,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They don't just take anything that comes in the mail. There's a significant process where a Democratic representative and a Republican representative have to check that the information
Right.
is correct and that the signature is correct. So it's not just I can pick up anything, somebody else's ballot and fill it in and sign, because it's not going to be counted. The signature's wrong.
Exactly. Exactly.
I've
So
had my
this is-
signature questioned before. There are very few instances of any sort of, I don't know of any instances of successful attempts at doing
But we
that.
do know of
Very-
people who did try to fool the system and got caught and ended up in jail. That we do know.
There you go. There you go. Okay. And I think actually this is one of the things people do think out there, and these kind of ideas get around that there's like rampant, um, rampant, stolen votes. And the reality is, even if people try, when you get to the polls, there's double checks on that, and so forth. So actually, Jessica put in the chat, other states are gerrymandering state and Congress districts. Please discuss some of the voter restriction laws. So we talked about voter suppression a little bit earlier. Does anybody want to talk about any specific voter restriction laws offhand?
So we're in the middle right now of a accelerated redistricting fight among various states, kicked off by a request on the part of the president to the governor of Texas to redraw congressional lines to create more safe Republican seats for the 2026 election. That's kicked off a response on the part of states that are Democratic in their leaning to balance, so that you don't have a one party is gerrymandering wildly and the other party is like, oh, we don't know what to do. We at Common Cause absolutely do not support mid-cycle redistricting, which is what this is about, right? Redistricting is supposed to happen once every 10 years when new information from the census shows changes in populations. This entire fight is to try and put a thumb on the scale for one party or the other. It's been kicked off by President Trump. There's been a response by the Democrats. And ultimately, what we need is a national law to guarantee fair redistricting for all states so that we don't have some states that are gerrymandering, some states that aren't, other states then decide to change and gerrymander. We need one rule because the balance in Congress has national implications. So allowing one state to do it one way and another state to do it another way means that you have this imbalance. And right now, what we're seeing is is kind of an arms race to balance. It's confusing the voters. It's bad policy. And what we need is to have one system where the lines are drawn based on population, based on communities of interest, and not based on it's good for an incumbent or it's good for one political party versus another political party. What we see right now is two can play this game and nobody should be playing this game.
And just for, because we do like to do entry level knowledge here. So what's gerrymandering? What's redistricting?
Leah, I don't want to dominate here, so yeah. Oh, great, thank you. Gerrymandering is the process of drawing political boundary lines to favor a political party or a incumbent. It's a way to try and put a thumb on the scale of the election to get a guaranteed result and to overspeak the will of the people. It's named after a 19th century Massachusetts governor who supposedly was the first one to start this process of trying to game the system by drawing particularly favorable political boundary lines.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're all absorbing that knowledge there. Uh,
His name was Eldridge Gerry, even though we call it gerrymandering, and a local Boston paper took a particular legislative district that had been drawn and said, it looks like a salamander, so it's a gerrymander.
is that really the story?
That's
Is that
really the
really?
story.
I love it.
That is
Yeah.
crazy.
I was mentioning before about Staten Island being more Republican. They put in some areas of Brooklyn into the Staten Island because they had to even out. So I don't understand that one either.
Well, they have to even out when you're drawing political boundary lines for Congress. The law requires that they must be exactly equivalent in size and the number of voters, plus or minus no more than one voter. And unfortunately,
Wow.
get more people to move to Staten Island, Fran, because there weren't enough people who were resident in Staten Island to make up the full quantum of people you need for a congressional district. So the fight has been what part of Brooklyn should be attached to Staten Island. And some people say this part because it's more Republican. Other people want to change it around and make it Park Slope because that's more Democratic. And it's been a ridiculous back and forth when what we need is neutral drawing of political boundary lines that are fair to all voters and give every voter a chance.
Let me mention, there's in the chat, there's a comment here. Aren't states changing the voter identification needed to vote and also restricting mail-in voting? Don't you need the state legislatures to change these laws once their states approve them? So does anybody it's beyond my knowledge area. So anybody want to speak to that?
So what's happening is some states have adopted very restrictive requirements for voter ID. In some states, the requirements are voter ID to be able to register. And when I say very restrictive, it's a very, very limited list of identification documents that are acceptable. So for instance, and I'm forgetting which state most recently changed its laws so that the student identification cards from the state university would no longer be accepted as a valid voter ID. Other states refused to accept the identification of service members. All of these are government issued identification cards, with the idea that basically what we're seeing is an attempt to choose who is able to vote and to choose the voter, which is part of what gerrymandering is about. Gerrymandering is about the leaders choose the voters, not the voters choose the leaders. Voter ID is a similar idea. It's people in power thinking, oh, these people won't be able to have the right ID. They don't like me. They don't vote for me. I don't want them to vote. I'm going to set up rules that I think my voters will be able to satisfy. Now, what's crazy about that is that it turns out it's not so simple to find a type of ID that only your voters will have and the voters you don't want will have. And so you end up invalidating a lot of your own voters, particularly older voters, who may not have access to a certified birth certificate for various reasons, right? Right now, if you live outside of New York City and you need a certified birth certificate because you want to get, let's say you want to get an enhanced driver's license, the waiting time, you send in your application, you send in the appropriate fee, and you don't receive your certified birth certificate for over a year. Now imagine if you had to bring that with you to vote. It's not your fault that the county clerk in whatever small rural county you were born in years ago is behind, doesn't have the staff, doesn't prioritize sending out certified birth certificates. Why should that disenfranchise you when you have the right to vote?
So a lot of things to ponder. Some of them sadder and shocking, right? So, is there anything good around here related to voting? What's going on? And actually, Jessica in the
Yeah,
chat mentioned
passports
that
are
passports are expensive. Yeah, so if that's the ID that's required, I think the last time I did it was like $160. So, and they also can take a rather long time to get. But so,
And
any good news?
really tens of millions of Americans do not have them
Right,
because they're not
right,
planning to go outside of the country. So
right.
again,
Why? Yeah, why would you have one?
who are you keeping from voting
Right,
and why?
right. Yeah. Okay, good
Um,
news, anyone?
I'm sorry?
Good news, anyone?
Well, I mean, we've just talked about a whole bunch of reforms that New York has adopted, right? And actually, early voting is the pattern in the vast majority of American states. Oklahoma and Texas were among the first states to adopt early voting, right? So, what we're seeing is a real improvement in access, the ability. Look, we have the ability to choose our leaders. If we can choose our leaders, we can choose how and when to vote. To me, it's that simple, right? Trust me to elect somebody. You can trust me to decide whether I'm going to vote in person on election day, I'm going to vote in person early, or I'm going to vote by mail. It's an even easier decision than who the next state legislator or city council member or president should be. Trust the voters is the way we look at it, and those reforms are still in place in most states. Some of them are being chipped away, but they are still there.
We also saw a record turnout in New York City in particular, in the last election for mayor, which kind of unreal turnout rates, people who had never voted before, just a surge in enthusiasm and excitement, and people showing up, which is always positive and exciting to see.
That's great. That's great. And hopefully with that came the discussions about the people who were running and doing more research and things like that. So definitely more people involved is good.
Yeah. The other thing I'll just say is that it's not just about vote. I mean, voting is incredibly important, but it's voting and accountability. It doesn't end, the responsibilities around it don't end after you go to the polls. The continuous action, making sure your elected officials are staying true to what they promised, being persistent about the changes you want to see in the policies you want to see enacted, that all has to happen as well. It's kind of like voting is incredibly important, and it's a first step, and it's important not to forget that continuous engagement is needed as well to kind of make and sustain change.
I love that idea of voting plus. I feel like one of your organizations should use that as a motto. Right. I absolutely love that. So we've talked about like leaders. So I've got some important people related to voting to mention that folks can look up. People like Merrick Garland and Stacey Abrams, who've been in the news. If you hadn't heard of them, check them out, look them up. But there's also historically important people like Fannie Lou Hamer and Mabel Ping Hua Lee. So there's lots of like important people to know about related to voting. And Susan, you mentioned somebody earlier. who else? What names should we know that are like visible and related to this topic that we should be aware of, historically or like current?
Well, that's always, I think, a bit of a loaded question. Because a lot of it depends on who you feel most comfortable relying on. And, I think the main thing is for everybody to do their own research, is to go directly to the candidates. That's my advice. If you're considering candidates, go to their website, read about them, read
Yep.
news stories, right? Listen to debates, make up your own mind. That's the most important thing you can do.
Exactly.
That's great. Okay, well, then we have it. Show's over. Everybody, we're done. No, that's great. Do your own research. It's fantastic. And I think that's the research is part of the voting plus, right? Vote, but plus do your research, right? I love that idea. And there's organizations, Richard put one in the chat, and also the wonderful organizations that are represented here as well. So
There are plenty of organizations that give different representatives report cards, right? Or that, let you know how they vote on particularly important issues that, for instance, an environmental organization might support, right? Or a reproductive rights organization might support, or a right to life organization might support. So there are a lot of sources of information out there. But again, and right now, concerns are about deep fakes, about IEs, about social media. And that's why I tell people, go to the candidate's website, listen to the candidate.
Yes. Yes, exactly. Exactly.
and somebody put in the chat, what are your thoughts on the Electoral College?
I'm
First of all,
gonna
you'd have to
put that
tell
right
us
to
what it is, and then you can talk about it. Anybody want to tackle that?
The electoral, that's how we vote
I
at
don't think anybody wants to do that one.
Leah's
federal-
willing. Leah's willing. Go
federal
ahead.
government. Each state is given a certain number of votes in the electoral college based off of like size and a number of factors, and the way that someone is elected president is based off of votes in the electoral college. So certain states, California has a lot of votes. New York doesn't have as many votes. Very basically, yeah.
So Common Cause is a supporter of the National Public Vote, which is a system. It's a way for, it's an interstate compact, basically, where states agree that they will cast their electoral college votes for the winner of the popular vote. There's the big challenge with the electoral college is that it is frankly just blankly an anti-small d democratic idea. It is meant to water down the popular choice, and to give the choice to the hands originally of the legislatures, but now each state uses popular vote. But we can get an anomalous result where the cumulative popular vote is for one candidate, but because of the way in which the electoral college is set up, you can end up with somebody who wins the electoral college vote who is not the majority choice of the majority of voters. And so the national popular vote is a way to ensure that the final vote for president mirrors the popular vote. And so it's an interstate compact. You would need to have states equivalent to 290 electoral college votes. Right now we're at 220. So we're not that far away. And I think there's a lot of public sentiment to have the popular vote be the deciding factor and not the historical anomaly of the electoral college. So
Okay, I
that's
think
our thoughts at Common Cause on the electoral college.
I think there's a lot of research people are going to be doing after the event on that topic. And so we have in the chat another question related. Isn't the idea of the Electoral College for the voice of the state to be louder than that of the individual?
Yes, as I said, it is a way in which to blunt the idea of having a democracy be the deciding factor. And in the past, it is a system which has definitely been applied for the benefit of the elites.
Has it always been that way, or is it just like ups and downs when it seems to represent more the popular vote and seems not, or is it just the nature of the beast that it's always going to be precarious?
We have more instances where the Electoral College winner is not the winner of the popular vote in modern times than we do in the 19th century. It has happened, but it was much rarer then than it is now, because of some of the population swings. And I think if you actually were to ask them, most Americans believe that the choice should be through just the direct vote without this intermediate anti-democratic measure. We've moved way past the idea that the primary unit should be the states, right? We no longer have state legislatures choosing our US senators, right? We do that by popular vote now. That wasn't the case originally.
Well, I cannot believe it, but we're actually at an end. Can you believe how fast an hour can go? I wonder if there's like one last thing you want to say to people before we do our little conclusion here. What would the one thing on this topic you want to make sure you get across today?
Voting should be a social occasion. It's a great opportunity to get together with your family and friends, especially if you're in a state that has early voting. You can have lunch together on a Saturday. You can go after church service on a Sunday. And you can reinforce the idea that it is our obligation and our right to be able to vote.
Love it. How about our other panelists? Any closing words?
Yeah,
No, I agree with that. We've had one gentleman that came in with his mother and father and his son. The parents were divorced. They were living in his house. They had separate rooms, but he took them both in to vote, his son to vote, and himself to vote.
That's great.
The father was 98 years old. Okay. And he wanted to come in to vote. So it was him, his ex-wife, his son, and the grandson.
That's
love
great.
it. I love it.
All
And
in one household.
and Jessica put in the chat, souls to polls. I like that. Leah, do you have any last thoughts for us?
yeah, just
Go
that
vote.
you
Go
and
vote.
you and every individual are the best messenger and about voting to your communities, that you know who your people are, they know you best, and they trust you more than they would trust me or listen to me or anybody else on this panel. And that every individual has a lot of power to influence their families, their friends, their communities. And how powerful is it if you can bring 3 people with you to vote, and they each get 3 people to vote, and that's how things change and people are elected and things sway. So not to underestimate the power of yourself and your immediate community to make change.
I love it. I love it. Well, I'm so grateful for a wonderful panelist here today. Thank you so much. Leah, Susan, Fran, thank you. And a wonderful guest to our audience as well. So thank you for coming. We enjoyed this discussion so much, and your questions and enthusiasm in the chats. Please spread the word about these ideas and these kinds of nuances of voting that we've talked about, such as the values that we've kind of hinted at today, things like accountability and equal access, the importance of knowing your rights, civic responsibility, and the importance of using your voice. And to continue this discussion, this is just like one way to start, but we encourage you to do one weekly action that's related to voting. If it's, having a conversation with somebody or making sure you're registered, making sure your name's spelled correctly on your registration,
Yes.
and getting informed and coming to this event is a great way to do that. And also learn more about your local and state and national elections, and not just the national ones, but the local and the state ones too, and attend events where you get to meet the candidates. We will send you access to the event video, where you can find the event video after the event, but also you will be able to see our infographic as well. After the event, we'll be able to send you that email that has access to both the infographic about that. Also, right now, you're going to see a poll. We'd love to hear from your feedback on how you thought of this event. Also want to let you know, so please take a minute to just fill that out. We have another free Know It All event, just like our event today in our Know It All program, next Thursday, April 30th from 6:30 to 7:30. The topic for that event is civil rights and music. You can look for and learn about more topics from Inform Your Community and more of our events by going to our website, not just in our Know It All program, but in any of our 6 programs. We have crafting, we have movie nights, we have all kinds of fun stuff. And our website is www.informyourcommunity.org. As always, we welcome donations, so feel free to help us keep our events free by going to our donate button on our website. And if you're watching this event on YouTube, please do like and subscribe. I want to thank our panelists and our audience again for being here. Really appreciate everybody. And please do take that poll that you have in front of you. Again, thanks so much, everybody. Have an absolutely wonderful night. Thank you for joining us, Fran, Leah, and Susan. So much fun hearing your insights. Have a great night. Thank you.